Leading up to the spring of 2015, Joslyn, Alejandra, Nino had become an enforcer and an assassin for Los Ciclones, a faction of Mexico's notorious Gulf cartel. She was known as La Flaca, or the Skinny One, both in reference to her slim figure and to the female skeleton saint that was worshipped throughout Mexico, with an increased popularity among criminals. Young women were known to be recruited by cartels under the belief that they wouldn't arouse the same level of suspicion with law enforcement and gangland rivals as their male counterparts. They would sometimes start as lookouts or escorts before being promoted to soldier ranks. An anonymously posted photo of Nino went viral on Facebook and Twitter in January of 2015. She was seen smiling for the camera while clad in a bulletproof vest and holding a rifle. She was at the time in her late teens or early 20s. Also visible in the viral photo was a gold chain around Nino's neck and the tattoo of her surname on her forearm. It was unclear for how long Nino had been a part of Los Ciclones or how she'd risen through the ranks. At the time of the upload, the gang was fighting over territory with Los Metros, another Gulf cartel faction. The picture was believed to have been released by a member of Los Metros with the purpose of having Nino arrested by law enforcement or killed by rival gangsters. The young woman who worked under Los Ciclones leader Hangel Eduardo Prado Rodriguez, aka Ciclone 7, was conducting operations in Rio Bravo, a territory mostly controlled by their rivals. At some point in mid-April of 2015, Nino was captured by Los Metros alongside a man and a woman who were also believed to be affiliated with Los Ciclones. On April the 13th, law enforcement in Matamoros found their dismembered remains abandoned in a Soriana parking lot. Some of Nino's body parts had been left inside an ice cooler, and she was identified via the tattoo on her forearm. The man who'd been captured with her was decapitated, and the other woman was dismembered. The bodies exhibited extensive signs of torture, likely carried out to extract information regarding Los Ciclones operations. After the vicious attack, Los Metros posted photos to social media as a warning to Nino's gang. One image showed her and the others beaten on the ground, while another was of Nino's severed remains inside the cooler. Los Metros left a message criticizing their rivals' use of female enforcers and warned, "This will happen to all the filthy who support Los Ciclones." Number 6. David Beckhauser Santos Herald. After serving in the US military, David Beckhauser Santos Herald returned to Brazil, where he became an enforcer and a hitman for criminal elements in his birth state of Santa Catarina. Herald, who held dual US and Brazilian citizenships, was a soldier for the US Army from 2008 to 2013 and saw action in Afghanistan. Upon going back to Brazil, he turned to a life of crime and got involved with a gang called Primeiro Grupo de Catarinense, or PGC. Herald, who became known as the American, was reported to have relied on his military experience to teach strategies and weapon use to other gang members. He took part in territorial drug trade disputes and was suspected of carrying out several assassinations ordered by his gangster affiliates. Herald was given a 16-year sentence for the hit-on-drug baron Tiago Policena de Oliveira, who was gunned down on March the 26th of 2014. The former soldier was also convicted of the attempted murder of the victim's brother. Herald was released in October of 2023 and ordered to serve the remainder of his sentence on house arrest. He had at one point developed an interest in music and became a producer for 20-year-old trap artist Bernardo Suarez de Rosa, professionally known as Boladin 211. On October the 2nd of 2024, Herald, who was at the time in his mid-30s, was recording a music video with De Rosa in Vila Nova, Cachoeirinha, Sao Paulo. Two unknown gunmen who were suspected of being affiliated with a rival gang pulled up to the scene. They fired over 60 shots at Herald, hitting him 32 times. He was rushed to the hospital, but his injuries proved far too severe and he was pronounced dead. An investigation was launched to find the assassins, but no arrests were reported in the immediate aftermath. De Rosa posted a social media tribute to Herald that read, "I love you forever. Thank you for everything you did for me. You will never be forgotten. A warrior doesn't die, he becomes a legend." Number 5. Luke Riddell. In October of 2018. Luke Riddell, also known as Luke Sears, was on a rural road west of Christchurch, New Zealand, to conduct a drug-related business transaction with Daniel Gary French. The latter ran a large-scale cannabis growing operation. Riddell was a member of the King Cobras, a gang infamous for their use of violence in settling territorial disputes. Founded by Samoans in the Auckland suburb of Ponsonby, the Cobras became prominent in the drug trade and had a presence throughout the country. Riddell met with French to collect on a $40,000 debt that he believed the grower owed the Cobras, while French believed Riddell owed him $60,000 for the cannabis he'd purchased. Riddell was accompanied by his fiancée, while French was joined by associate Alistair Cochrane. Fighting erupted at some point during the meetup, prompting Cochrane to brandish a shotgun. Enraged, Riddell reportedly asked, "What are you gonna do with that?" In the moments that followed, Cochrane blasted the Cobra's member in the chest and shoulder. He and French drove off, abandoning Riddell by the side of the road as his fiancée desperately tried to get him help. The gang member succumbed to his injuries shortly thereafter. In the shooting's aftermath, French pleaded guilty to manslaughter and was jailed for 10 years, while Cochrane was convicted of murder following a trial in March of 2020. He was jailed for life with a non-parole period of 11 years. Number 4. Curtis Algier. By the fall of 2006, Curtis Algier was in his mid-20s and had already been in and out of prison for offenses that included weapons possession, theft, felony burglary, and repeated parole violations. His criminal activity was mainly focused in South Dakota and Utah. In November, he violated parole and became a fugitive. He spent 2 days on the run before he was tracked down by a Salt Lake City SWAT team to a hotel room where he'd taken refuge while armed. The tactical unit raided the building and Algier fell through the ceiling when he tried to hide. He was arrested and subsequently convicted of being a felon in possession of a firearm. In June of 2007, he was sentenced to 104 months in prison. Algier was a white supremacist skinhead and a member of the gang Aryan Empire Warriors. He had a vast collection of facial tattoos, mostly related to his white supremacist beliefs, including iron crosses on his temples, SS lightning bolts on his jawbone, and a swastika in the center of his forehead. Among other tattoos visible in his mugshot was the phrase "Property of Jolene" inked across his forehead, a boot on his nose, and the name of metalcore band Hatebreed above his upper lip. On June the 25th of 2007, 11 days after he'd been sentenced, Algier was escorted to the University of Utah, where he was scheduled for an MRI. He didn't have his shackles, as he waited in an examination room at the university's orthopedic center with his escort, corrections officer Stephen Anderson. Without warning or provocation, Algier attacked Anderson, overpowered him, and stole his weapon. He then fatally shot the corrections officer, once in the chest and once in the head. Algier fled the clinic, carjacked a Ford Explorer, and led the police on a high-speed chase. During the pursuit, he tried to run over a deputy who'd attempted to use a tire ripper to disable the stolen SUV. One of the Ford's tires went flat, and the escaped convict fled on foot into an Arby's restaurant at 1700 South and Redwood Road. He grabbed employee Alejandra Gomez, placed a gun to his head, and dragged him towards the kitchen. Algier also pointed the weapon at 59-year-old Eric Fullerton, who was having breakfast at the restaurant. Gomez either lost his balance or struggled, while Algier was holding him by the neck, and the escaped inmate fired a shot, narrowly missing the worker's head. Algier then proceeded to beat Gomez with the butt of the weapon. As the attack was unfolding, Fullerton, a Vietnam War veteran and a former Army paratrooper, sprang into action and grabbed Algier's arm. As they struggled for control of the pistol, Algier punched Fullerton and slashed his throat with a knife. The war veteran would later recall, "I didn't feel pain. I did feel the coldness of the blade, and I heard the sound." Although injured, he was able to pry the pistol away from Algier. The weapon dropped to the floor and Fullerton picked it up. Algier went into an office at the restaurant where he was ultimately arrested less than an hour after he'd escaped. Fullerton survived the attack and was subsequently hailed as a hero for his intervention. During the legal proceedings that followed, Algier would maintain that he'd shot Anderson by accident, claiming that the officer's weapon had discharged as they fought. Nearly 5 years after the fatal shooting, on October the 3rd of 2012, Algier pleaded guilty to murder, 3 counts of attempted murder, and several other charges under a plea deal that spared him the death penalty. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Number 3. Sabrina Jan Montero. Leading up to October of 2023, Chilean woman Sabrina Jan Montero had amassed a massive following on TikTok as a narco-influencer. The 24-year-old, who was also known as La Ina, rose to fame by dancing or talking about street life while incarcerated at the Women's Penitentiary Center in San Miguel. The authorities didn't comment on how she was able to create content while locked up for trafficking cannabis, cocaine, MDMA, and psychedelic mushrooms. Montero's performances led to her being dubbed the TikTok narco queen and earned her more than 500,000 followers and 11 million likes. During her time in prison, she became romantically involved with her cellmate and fellow drug baroness, Antonella Marchant. She was the leader of the Los Marchant clan and had been handed a 15-year sentence. In 2021 for drug trafficking and other crimes. In May of 2023, Montero was released from prison after serving roughly 1 year. On October the 23rd, she was parking outside of a nail salon in Padre Hurtado, where she had an appointment. CCTV and bystander cell phone video captured the moment that Montero was approached by 2 pistol-wielding masked gunmen. The young woman was pulled out of her vehicle and shot at point-blank range in broad daylight. One of the assassins, whose face was covered with a bandana, fired several more shots into Montero's body as she lay dying in the middle of the street. She died later in the day after suffering 8 gunshot wounds. The assassins fled in her vehicle, which was later found in flames about half an hour's drive away in Quilicura. Montero was believed to have been targeted by a rival gang, and local authorities described her execution as a score-settling murder. No arrests were reported in the immediate aftermath, and her assassins remain unidentified. Today's topic was requested by Herman Munster 4949 and Strange Stangle 64. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Miguel Hangel Correa Diaz and Junior Noé Alvarado Requeño. In early April of 2022, a Maryland court sentenced Miguel Hangel Correa Diaz to life in prison after he was convicted of multiple drug-related charges, as well as conspiracy to commit murder in aid of racketeering and murder in aid of racketeering. Correa Diaz, also known as Reaper, was a high-ranking member of MS-13. He reported directly to the gang's leadership in El Salvador and was responsible for implementing MS-13's program of violence and intimidation on the East Coast. From 2015 to 2018, he and co-defendant Junior Noé Alvarado Requeño, aka Insolente, led a faction called the Sailors Locos Salvatrucos West Side Clique, with a home base in Langley Park, Maryland. The gang trafficked in illegal drugs including marijuana, heroin, and cocaine. Sailors Clique also extorted local immigrant-run businesses, demanding money from owners for operating in MS-13 controlled territories. Correa Diaz and Alvarado Requeño applied the gang's notorious brand of extreme violence in maintaining their control. In June of 2016, Alvarado Requeño ordered the Sailors Clique to carry out a hit on a suspected rival gangster. The gang's affiliate, Vanessa Alvarado, lured 18-year-old Christian Villagran Morales to Malcolm King Park in Gaithersburg with the promise of intercourse. Villagran Morales was led to a wooded area where he was ambushed by 4 MS-13 members who killed him by delivering over 150 knife strikes. After his brutal murder, it emerged that the teen had no gang affiliations. In March of 2017, a Sailors Clique member was hiding out from law enforcement in Lynchburg, Virginia, when he had a dispute with high school student Raymond Wood. Correa Diaz and Alvarado Requeño put together a hit squad that kidnapped Wood from his front lawn. He was taken to Bedford County where the gang tortured him. Wood died after being stabbed, strangled, and having his right hand cut off. Over a dozen law enforcement agencies worked together in a multi-state operation that culminated with the arrests and convictions of Correa Diaz and Alvarado Requeño. Much like his partner, the latter was also handed a life sentence. Now that you've taken a closer look at these criminal lives, let's observe life on the other side of the fence. After number 1, we've got 16 citizens who stopped crimes. Coming up for you next. Stay tuned. Number 1. Isit Eren. For years, leading up to May of 2024, London's Tottenham Turks street gang was locked in a territorial war with the Hackney Bombers over the lucrative local heroin trade. The gangs, both of which were predominantly made up of men of Turkish descent, clashed dozens of times on the London streets, resulted in multiple deaths and countless injuries. In 2015, Turks leader Isit Eren was sentenced to 21 years in prison for firearm offences in London. That same year, his gang tried to break him out of a prison van outside Wood Green Crown Court in the capital's north. Officers responded with gunfire, and one of the Turks involved in the operation, 28-year-old Jermaine Baker, was fatally shot in the head. The attempt to extract Eren failed, and his cousin, Oshkan, was arrested for spearheading the operation. In 2019, Eren was transferred to a Turkish prison from which he absconded after only a month of incarceration. He was arrested 3 years later in Moldova, but by May of 2024, he was back on the street. Eren continued running the gang's UK operations while in exile and was believed to have orchestrated a shooting that took place on May the 29th of 2024 in Dalston, northeast London. The target was 64-year-old Hackney Bombers leader and founder Abdullah Baybasin, who was wheelchair-bound following a previous attempt on his life. A lone motorcycle rider opened fire outside a restaurant in Kingsland High Street, but Baybasin wasn't hit. 3 adult men of Turkish descent suffered gunshot injuries, as did a young girl. She was left in critical condition after a bullet hit her in the head while she was having a meal with her family. Updates from July of 2024 indicated that she was in stable condition. In mid-July, Eren was sitting outside a cafe in Chisinau, Moldova's capital city. A man wearing a motorcycle helmet approached him while riding on an e-scooter. He brandished a pistol and shot Eren 7 times, with 3 of the bullets hitting him in the head. The Turks' leader was pronounced dead at the scene. The authorities believed that the assassination was retaliation for the Dalston shooting. At a retail center in Greenwood, Indiana, a heavily armed gunman shot and killed 3 people while injuring another 2 on the evening of July the 17th of 2022. The active shooter situation unfolded at around 5:56 p.m. when Jonathan Douglas Sapperman opened fire in the food court at the Greenwood Park Mall. Sapperman reportedly had 2 rifles, a handgun, and more than 100 rounds of ammunition. He fired a total of 24 bullets from one of the weapons. A 30-year-old man was among the 3 fatalities, as were a married couple from Indianapolis. 2 young females suffered injuries as well. Greenwood Police Chief Jim Ison stated that a bystander at the scene engaged the suspect almost immediately after he started shooting. With his personal revolver drawn, 22-year-old Elisha Dickin shot in Sapperman's direction. The young man also motioned for other mall goers to evacuate behind him. According to the police chief, Dickin fired 10 rounds, 8 of which hit the suspect, who subsequently fell to the ground and died soon after. Upon being handcuffed and interrogated by police, Dickin, who was legally carrying a concealed pistol, had his version of events corroborated by CCTV footage. If a responsibly armed person hadn't taken action within the first 2 minutes of the shooting, many more people would have died. According to Chief Ison, the latter further praised Dickin's proficient and sound tactics in firing at the perpetrator from a considerable distance, despite having no experience in law enforcement or the military. 20-year-old Sapperman had reportedly lost his job at a warehouse and been evicted from his home leading up to the shooting. According to CBS News, he told his girlfriend before the incident that he wanted to take others with him. Number 15. Corpus Christi homeowner. At approximately 12:50 a.m. on May the 11th of 2020, a suspected burglar was shot to death by a homeowner on North Beach in Corpus Christi, Texas. Residents of the home, located in the 700 block of Snug Harbor Drive, reportedly heard a commotion in an attached part of their house. Upon investigating, they encountered 25-year-old Isaac Galvin and Kieran Rice, aged 22. One of the homeowners opened fire at them as they fled in a vehicle driven by 25-year-old Zulma Zepeda Antunes. Galvin was later found dead at a motel on Surfside Boulevard, where his two female accomplices were apprehended. Zepeda Antunes was arrested on an outstanding warrant for past drug charges, while Rice was arrested for burglary of a habitation. Number 14. Franklin, Ohio homeowner. Early on November the 2nd of 2022, 36-year-old Jeffrey Carl was shot in the buttocks after allegedly attempting to burglarize a residence in Franklin, Ohio. A man had just gotten home from the hospital hours prior to when Carl broke into his house. Believing no one was home, the victim called 911 after firing his gun, unsure of whether he hit the suspect or not. Franklin police officers were dispatched to the Park Avenue home at around 3:25 a.m. When law enforcement arrived, Carl had already fled on foot and hid inside a neighbor's shed, where he was eventually found by a canine. He was taken to Atrium Medical Center, where his injuries were deemed non-life-threatening. Carl was then transported to the police station and booked on burglary charges. The department's lieutenant said that the suspect was being held in jail in lieu of a $50,000 bond. Number 13. Fangu Chen. A week after 3 armed burglars broke into a Doraville home in Georgia on September the 16th of 2016, the Gwinnett County Police Department released security footage from the incident. Shortly after the suspects entered the house at around 4 a.m., 36-year-old resident Fangu Chen emerged from her bedroom and fired numerous shots at the suspects. In the surveillance video, one of the males jumped through a glass door to escape the deadly shooting, while pieces of drywall were flying all over the residence. 28-year-old Antonio Leaks of Atlanta was shot and hurt, while 2 of the men fled. When law enforcement arrived at the scene located on Spring Drive, they discovered Leaks dead in the driveway. The police department's corporal stated in an interview that Chen exercised her right to defend her livelihood and property. 18 months later, on March the 29th, one of the suspects was taken into custody. 35-year-old Bernard Eugene Little was accused of felony murder and armed robbery. The third suspect remained on the loose. Number 12. Metro PCS Worker. On August the 26th of 2019, in southwest Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, an attempted robbery at a Metro PCS store was foiled by the only employee on duty at the time. The incident was captured by the cell phone store's CCTV cameras. As shown in the footage, the robber entered the business when there were no other customers inside. With the firearm in hand, he threw a bag on the counter and demanded money from the worker. The latter made a split-second move to draw his own gun, at which point he shot the hooded man several times. A witness who was in the area at the time told CBS that, out of nowhere, he heard 10 gunshots ring out. Emergency medical services declared the suspect dead at the scene shortly after 4 p.m. The next day, a spokesperson from the homicide unit for the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office said that the shooting was justified and the employee wouldn't be charged as a result. Number 11. Joe Howard Teague, an elderly Californian from the greater Los Angeles area, shot and gravely wounded a burglar after growing frustrated over being the target of several home invasions. According to the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, the retired plumber, 93-year-old Joe Howard Teague, turned the tables on a group of home invaders early on June the 29th of 2022. He retrieved his rifle and confronted them inside his Moreno Valley home. Teague approached the burglars and attempted to put them under citizen's arrest. The suspects didn't cooperate, however, as one of them came at him with a fishing pole. The homeowner later claimed that as he attempted to keep the suspects at gunpoint, They started hurling objects at him. At around 12:30 p.m., Teague dialed 911 and reported the break-in. Before deputies responded, a witness reported seeing numerous people fleeing Teague's house on foot. When law enforcement arrived at the Eucalyptus Avenue residence, one of the alleged burglars, Joseph A. Ortega, was suffering from a gunshot wound. The 33-year-old was taken to a hospital where he succumbed to his injuries the following day. Teague, meanwhile, was unharmed. He was escorted to the police station for questioning and was later released. Investigators established that several people, including Ortega, had invaded Teague's property at the time of the shooting. Although it appeared as though the homeowner's decision to open fire was justified, an investigation was launched to confirm. Number 10. Tony Martin. A pair of burglars broke into 54-year-old Tony Martin's farmhouse in Emneth Hungate, Norfolk, England, on the evening of August the 20th of 1999. Martin fired his shotgun 3 times at the intruders, shooting into the pitch black of night. Teenager Fred Barris was hit in the back and both of his legs were wounded. He and 29-year-old Brendan Fearon managed to escape out the window. Fearon made his getaway with 33-year-old Darren Bark, who served as the getaway driver. But Barris succumbed to his gunshot wounds at the scene. At the time of his death, he had a total of 29 convictions under his belt, including 7 for theft and 6 for fraud. He had been given a 2-month sentence in a juvenile offenders facility for theft, assault on a police officer, and rowdy and intoxicated behavior. 3 days after the break-in on August the 23rd, the farmhouse owner was accused of murder, attempted murder, wounding with intent to cause injury, and possessing a firearm with intent to endanger life. He didn't have a valid shotgun certificate, as it had previously been revoked. Martin claimed to have been acting in self-defense, but prosecutors argued he was lying in wait for the pair and had fired from close range without warning. Ultimately, a jury found Martin guilty. He was given a life sentence with a minimum mandatory term of 9 years, which was subsequently reduced to 8 years. On January the 10th of 2000, Fearon and Bark admitted conspiring to burglarize the farmhouse. Bark received a sentence of 2.5 years in prison with an additional 12 months for prior offenses, while Fearon received a 3-year prison term. In 2001, Martin filed an appeal, arguing that his story hadn't been properly presented at trial. His defense team provided documentation of his paranoid personality condition, which was aggravated by despair. They argued that Martin's paranoia was centered primarily around the notion of someone breaking into his home. Furthermore, he was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. The Court of Appeal accepted the submission, and Martin's murder conviction was commuted to manslaughter with a 5-year sentence. His 10-year sentence for wounding Fearon was lowered to 3 years on the basis of diminished responsibility. Martin was released on July the 28th of 2003, having served the first 3 years of his 5-year sentence. Number 9. Tina Ring and Ashley Lee. Police were called to the Forest Acres liquor store in Tulsa, Oklahoma, on February the 22nd of 2018 after the clerk reported that she'd shot a regular customer who was attempting to rob the place. When officers arrived at the store, located near Memorial Drive and 12th Street, the suspects had already left. He later showed up at a nearby hospital with critical gunshot wounds. Law enforcement identified him as Tyrone Lee, who'd allegedly been involved in 10 other robberies in the area. According to police, the man at the time, in his mid-30s, entered the liquor store brandishing a shotgun and demanding cash. After securing the money, he left, but then returned once more. A glimpse of the incident was captured by surveillance cameras, which showed the store owner, 53-year-old Tina Ring, and her daughter, Ashley Lee, both grab firearms and start shooting at Lee. Having been struck by multiple bullets, the suspect fought Ring for her gun, beating her with a pistol. He managed to escape and Ring suffered a gash to the skull. Lee was indicted on charges of using and discharging a firearm during a crime of violence, possessing an unregistered firearm, and being a felon in possession of a firearm. In January of 2019, the man pleaded guilty to all counts. 4 months later, he was given a sentence of 22 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. Number 8. Son of a pizza place employee. Gruesome security footage captured the moment a masked robber was shot in the face by a teenage boy at around 9:30 p.m. on December the 9th of 2021. The incident, which took place at Bold Pizza on Spring Garden Street in Philadelphia, started unfolding when a 33-year-old man entered the pizzeria with the intention of carrying out a robbery. The suspect was standing at the counter and reaching out towards the cash register, which was opened by a female employee. The two struggled as the thief grabbed the money. The employee's 14-year-old son, who was also behind the counter, reached for a gun, pointed it at the robber, and pulled the trigger, striking him at least once in the face at close range. According to the police, the wounded man fled the scene on foot, leaving a blood trail in his wake. 6 ABC reported that when officers arrived at the scene, they came upon the pizza shop in utter disarray, with broken glass, money, and a large amount of blood all over the floor. After following the blood trail, authorities caught up with the suspect, who had cash concealed in his pocket at a nearby subway station. The man was taken to Jefferson Hospital, where his condition was listed as critical. According to investigators, surveillance footage from a CVS on Spring Garden Street confirmed that the suspect, who hadn't been identified, was a member of a group that had just raided the pharmacy 5 minutes before entering the pizzeria. His 2 accomplices were still being sought by police as of the latest updates. Number 7. Ruben Kendrick. On the afternoon of September the 21st of 2015, a man who was robbing a Citizens Bank on Van Dyke Avenue in Warren, Michigan, was shot by a patron. 43-year-old Henry Houston Mann of Ypsilanti entered the bank at approximately 4 p.m. and asked how he could set up direct deposit to his account. When the teller asked him to have a seat, he took out a handgun and pointed it at her. Ruben Kendrick, who was in his early 60s and had just stepped out of the bathroom, was told by Mann to step behind the counter. After Kendrick refused, the man pushed him behind the teller line, demanding money with no hidden die packs. After he was handed the cash, Kendrick, who was a concealed carry license holder, loaded his Smith & Wesson revolver and opened fire at the suspect, hitting him once in each arm and once in one leg. The robber subsequently staggered out of the bank and collapsed to the ground. He was taken to the hospital with non-critical injuries. The following year, Mann was sentenced to 7 years for brandishing a firearm during a crime of violence and 3 years for bank robbery. He was also ordered to pay $1,781 in restitution to the bank. Number 6. Thomas Greer. Upon returning to his Long Beach home at around 9 p.m. on July the 22nd of 2014, California man Thomas Greer encountered 2 people stealing items inside. Subsequent reports revealed it was the 4th time the 80-year-old had been robbed. According to the Long Beach police chief, the 2 suspects, 26-year-old Gus Polly Adams and Andrea Miller, aged 28, punched the homeowner and slammed him to the ground, breaking his collarbone. Adams subsequently attempted to gain access to the victim's safe. Greer was able to sneak into another room to retrieve his pistol. He then went back to the robbers and started shooting at them. When the suspects fled, Greer pursued them outside, continuing to fire in their direction. Miller told him not to shoot because she was pregnant, but she was nevertheless hit twice in the back. She died at the scene. The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office later determined that the woman hadn't in fact been pregnant at the time of her death. Greer wasn't charged, as it was concluded that he'd used his legal right to self-defense when he shot and killed the woman. Adams was arrested along with his 52-year-old mother, Ruby, who served as a lookout during the robbery. She pleaded no contest to 1 count of first-degree domestic burglary and received a 3-year prison term. On August the 21st of 2016, her son was sentenced to 12 years in state prison.
She was dead. Well, yeah, I shot her twice. She best be dead.
Number 5. Brazilian post office robbery. CCTV footage that was shared on social media on Christmas Eve 2019 showed a man putting a swift end to an attempted armed robbery at a Brazilian post office. Moments before the incident, a customer appeared to be waiting at the counter. Subsequently, a man wearing a black hoodie entered the office, brandishing a gun at the female cashier and pointing his other hand at the register. Within a matter of seconds, the customer pulled out his own gun and fired several rounds directly into the suspect's temple, decisively eliminating the threat. No further details were provided to contextualize the viral clip. Number 4. Alabama man. A burglary in Andalusia, Alabama, was reported to local police on the evening of January the 6th of 2023. Officers responded to the 9th Street residence, but by the time of their arrival, the suspect was gone. The homeowner told law enforcement that while he was sitting in his car outside his house, a man wearing a mask and carrying a gun approached him. According to the victim, the suspect tried to rob him. In response, the homeowner pulled out his own gun and repeatedly shot at the would-be thief, who was later identified as 18-year-old DeAndre Nicholas Sheridan. That same evening, authorities received another call from Andalusia Health regarding a patient with a non-life-threatening gunshot wound, who was subsequently confirmed to be Sheridan. The young man was arrested at the care facility and later booked at the Covington County Jail on a $150,000 bond. He was reportedly charged with first-degree robbery. Number 3. David McLaughlin. 29-year-old David Bailey set off an alarm when he broke into someone's garage in Dunkirk, Indiana, on April the 21st of 2014. The 31-year-old homeowner, identified as David McLaughlin, spotted the suspect and opened fire. Bailey was sprinting down an alley, attempting to flee when one of the bullets struck him in the left arm. In June of the following year, the suspect was given a 3-year home detention term after entering a guilty plea to burglary charges. 10 months later, Bailey sued McLaughlin, seeking compensation for the damages he'd allegedly incurred, which he claimed was well over $100,000. The burglar insisted that he hadn't entered McLaughlin's garage to steal anything. The lawsuit stated that while chasing Bailey down, the homeowner had proceeded to the public road off his property and continued discharging his .45 caliber pistol down the dark alley. Court records indicated that a bullet had hit Bailey in the back of the arm, piercing an artery and inflicting serious and permanent damage. McLaughlin's lawyer told Fox 59 that he didn't often see someone who'd burglarized the home turn around and sue the homeowner for damages, calling the suit outrageous. In September of 2014, a Jay County Superior Court jury found McLaughlin guilty of criminal recklessness. He was given a 60-day jail term and a 4-month home detention period as punishment. Number 2. Craig Cope. A California store owner said it was either him or me after putting a stop to an armed robbery during the early morning hours of July the 31st of 2022. A dark BMW SUV pulled up alongside 80-year-old Craig Cope's liquor store in the city of Norco. The man witnessed 4 armed and masked suspects exit the vehicle and enter the store. Surveillance video showed that just seconds after the group announced their intention to hold the place up, Cope fired his shotgun, striking one of the would-be robbers in the arm. The group subsequently fled the scene. Cope suffered a heart attack and was consequently hospitalized. One of the suspects, 23-year-old Rashid Deshaun Lee Belvin, had a wound consistent with a shotgun blast when authorities later found him at a hospital in Southern California. According to the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, the other 3 robbers involved were 22-year-old Justin Johnson, Jamar Williams, aged 27, and 24-year-old Davon Broadus. They were each held in custody on a $500,000 bond. Following his release from the hospital, Belvin was arraigned and ordered to be held on the same bond amount as his co-defendants. They were charged with attempted robbery, possession of a stolen firearm, and elder abuse. Number 1. Ainsley Pacheco. On the evening of October the 4th of 2020, 2 armed intruders broke into the Miami home of 26-year-old OnlyFans star Ainsley Pacheco. Her husband, Daniel Pacheco, was watching the NBA Finals with some friends at around 8 p.m. when the 2 burglars followed a guest inside. After forcing their way into the house, the pair told everyone to get on the ground and began confiscating jewelry from the men in the living room. According to the incident report, Ainsley was in her bedroom at the time. Upon hearing the commotion, she retrieved her firearm and shot at the intruders. She reportedly came face to face with one of the suspects, who told her to put the gun down. She responded saying, "Don't shoot me, my son is in here." After returning Ainsley's fire, the suspects fled the scene. Daniel grabbed the gun from his wife, ran outside, and continued firing at the robbers, who sped off in a dark-colored vehicle. An estimated $100,000 in jewelry was stolen during the home invasion. As of the latest developments, law enforcement was still working to determine if the attack was targeted or random. Thanks for watching. Would you rather spend a week partying with P. Diddy or doing jobs for a drug cartel? Let us know in the comments section below.